Mic's on? Great. Welcome. We're here today to talk about our employee homepage and our journey taking our homepage from an on-prem installment into the cloud. Obviously, this is going to be a journey that's probably familiar to a lot of you. I assume if you're here, it's because you're either starting out on a similar path, or you've already started on that path and you're somewhere along the way, or you've completed it successfully and you're here to gloat. So we're going to be talking about kind of our thinking, some of the challenges that arose, and we hope that you find some things in here that you can relate to. So basically, we had launched a new employee homepage in the spring of 2017. This was a significant event for us because this was in many ways our first big step toward what we refer to internally as our focus on the employee experience. Prudential for many years now has been focusing on the customer experience, and we've developed a lot of great best practices around it. We've developed a lot of expertise around it. But as is often the case, we had kind of been giving our employees short shrift when it came to the experience that we were serving up to them. And we had decided that in order to really unlock the potential in our employees, and when I talk about the potential, I'm talking about increases in efficiency, in productivity, in engagement, in a sense of their connection to the overall objectives of the company, unleashing them as brand ambassadors. All of this, this tremendous potential that existed was largely going untapped, and we felt that by focusing on them as a key customer segment, that we could make great strides in this direction. So we had launched this site. It was a big improvement over what we had had before, which was really sort of a daily newsletter. You saw it or you didn't, and then it disappeared. The new site had a modern news design. Content stayed on the page a lot longer. You were able to go in once a week, and you were able to find all the stories that had been published recently. We had content coming in from multiple sources, so it wasn't just corporate content. It was also content from the employee's own line of business. It was responsive. It was social. And we felt that we had presented our employees with a big improvement. The numbers bore this out. We saw significant increases in engagement, readership. But as we were launching this, we had on the horizon our move to SharePoint. Now, there was a short period where we had a quick debate. We said, you know what, we have a pretty successful employee homepage. Do we simply lift and shift this? Or do we look at the opportunities that SharePoint and Azure present and look to redesign this? I'm guessing you already know which way we went. But our thinking was this. We had solved a lot, but we still had some big things that were still to be solved. One of them was international. So we're a very internationally dispersed company. A lot of our businesses in other countries are on different networks with different directories. As a result, they don't all get the same employee homepage that we get. This was very important to us because getting the same employee homepage for us really does sort of get to that key thing of driving a common culture and a common sense of purpose. We think of that as sort of the dinner table that everybody gathers around once a day. So international was huge. The other was that we had a very dispersed intranet ecosystem. I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this. Every function, every business, every corporate center had their own intranet. Each one was designed by that team. If employees went from one site to another, they got no consistency in the experience. These sites were all very hierarchically arranged. It was a challenge to navigate, and all the metrics bore that out. So what we were looking to do was to create a common framework, a common intranet ecosystem, a common framework where everyone would have essentially the same site with their content populating that site. And the last thing was we wanted to build something that was extensible, something that we could continue to build on as we moved forward with an employee dashboard, with the introduction of new tools. This was going to be the foundation for what we were thinking internally was our ultimate goal of creating a holistic employee digital experience. So obviously, with all the opportunities that Azure and SharePoint presented us, we made the move forward with a pretty significant redesign. And Pam's going to talk to you about some of the specifics.
Right. Thanks, Ben. So I want to take a minute just to talk to you about our journey to Office 365 to the cloud, right? Because I think it's important to understand where we started to see how far we've come and how it ultimately enabled the Vision project. So going back to 2016, we started out with a mail migration. We were moving from a Lotus Notes on-prem implementation to Outlook and Exchange, probably pretty familiar to a lot of people. But with that, we also were introducing OneDrive. So as every single employee was being migrated, they were being provisioned and licensed for OneDrive. So that was really our first exposure into SharePoint. And that was important for a lot of reasons, and it was also important that we learned a lot there. We are Prudential, we're a very highly regulated company, right? So we have to make sure that the appropriate controls and compliance are in place. So, you know, that was extremely critical to us in terms of foundationally learning about what that process would be and maturing that over time. We learned a lot about what configuration means, what we can control, what we can't control. We even implemented, because it was a large-scale migration, we had to start down the path of supporting the users, making sure it was a smooth transition. So we built out a organizational readiness workstream that continues today. I just want to give a quick shout out. Team's here today. We have a lot of expertise in the house. It takes a village, so I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions they have about that phase and our ongoing efforts to introduce and build upon our experiences with Office 365. So while we were in that initial phases, we also wanted to figure out what our strategy was going to be around collaboration. As you know, Office 365 is sort of this open platform, right? Open self-service platform where users can go in and pretty much at a click provision almost anything they want, right? For us, we needed a little bit more of a control around that, but we also had some experience with an open model with our IBM Connections platform, which was also being migrated to SharePoint. With that open model comes some other challenges in terms of sprawl and being able to manage the environment. So we wanted to keep it simple and easy, but also put a little bit of control around how we introduce things into the environment in terms of collaboration and also capabilities. So we also have a ServiceNow implementation. So we decided to leverage that, and we built very simple forms, quick and easy. The users go in and they enter a few pieces of information, and at a cost, and in some cases with approval, they're automatically provisioned either the capability or a site or whatever they're asking for in the Office 365 space. So with that, we have an automation engine, right? And we learned a lot during that phase as well. Now we're in the custom dev arena, right? We're learning a lot about what does it mean to do custom application development on Office 365. A lot goes with that. We had to standardize on tool sets. We are an agile shop. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But we wanted to continue to use Jira because that was our tool of choice. What are we going to do with Visual Studio, Team Studio? Standardizing on that. What does our DevOps function really look like in this new world, right? We're maturing that as we go along. And can't forget about Azure, right? We really had to learn how we were going to work with Azure and leverage Azure in this new custom dev space that we were in. So once we were running smoothly with our self-provisioning strategy, we have the migrations underway. As Ben mentioned, we had some aspirations for Vision, so we decided that we're going to start with a POC. So we took the teams that were working on the existing implementation of Vision, and we asked them to do an assessment, looking at some baseline requirements that we knew we wanted to carry over. Again, not potentially a lift and shift, but certainly the capabilities that we knew that we needed on a new platform if we were to migrate, and take an assessment. What kind of effort is it going to take to really to do that kind of work in the new environment? And so when they came back with their findings from that initial POC, you got to remember this was about 2 summers ago. A few things fell out, and just to give you a good example of that, Modern was a must-have for us. It was a challenge on the existing platform that we were on. We actually introduced that a little bit late, so we knew we wanted to do that right out of the gate. And at that time, Modern was, there were some capabilities there, but it really wasn't where it needed to be in terms of out of the box, right? We had to do a lot of custom dev to achieve those requirements that we really wanted to set for ourselves. And so, but the team also recognized that the SharePoint Framework was coming, right? And that was really going to be a game changer based on what their understanding of that was. It was only actually, I believe it was only going into preview, But we knew that it was going to be a significant difference. So we took that POC and kind of shelved it temporarily, continued down and built out the resources and the skills required to do application development, continued to build on our portfolio of self-service products. And when the application framework was more of a reality, we took round two. We did round two of the POC. And they very quickly came back and said there was enough there that we are definitely still, or we're headed down the right path. We're on the right track in terms of SharePoint to move forward with the next evolution and vision. So right now, Ben's going to take you through some of the challenges behind what we were trying to accomplish.
Thanks, Pam. Yes, some of the many challenges. First and foremost, as I mentioned, we were looking to take what had been a single page and turn it into an extended intranet framework. The example we used when speaking to our business partners was if you go onto LinkedIn and you go to a company page, the template is owned by LinkedIn, the content's owned by the company. This resonated with our business partners, but there were some challenges, right? So these were owners of sites that had 6, 10, 12 pages on the smaller sites. On the larger sites, we had one that had close to 180 pages. This was a really big trust fall we were asking them to make with us to significantly change the way their intranets were structured so that they were flatter, they were more intuitive, they were more consistent, all in service to the employee experience. So this took us quite a long time, and we had to start very early in the process selling them on this notion. Obviously, we were looking to create a homepage that brought in content from multiple sources to a degree beyond which we had not even begun to touch in the current employee homepage. This required a back-end publishing architecture that was really based on publishing to employees, not to sites. This was a big paradigm shift, not only for us, but for all of our partners. In the past, everybody thought, like, where does this piece of content go? In the new model, it's really, to whom does this piece of content go? So we were using web parts that were publishing based on search queries that we were writing. We needed to design these in a way so that everybody got the content that was specific to them, relevant to them, or content that they had selected. But we had to do it in a way where the queries were not so cumbersome that we were actually creating performance issues with our page. So designing this, getting this just right was an ongoing process with the team, and I think was really one of the great accomplishments of this effort. We had to solve for publishing to international. Now, as I mentioned before, international was one of the main reasons we were doing this, but international was not just about translation. It'd be easy enough to just set up a site and say, okay, this is our Spanish site, this is our Portuguese site. With our international businesses, you have different regulatory requirements, you have different cultural norms that you have to deal with, right? And you have to deal with the fact that these businesses have been and continue to be relatively autonomous, right? So we don't want to go in there and feel like we are trying to force something on them. We needed to do this in a way that was collaborative, cooperative, and where they felt like they were again, partners, participants in the process. So this was a big challenge to create things that were common and unique to the businesses at the same time. Finally, we had to create a homepage that presents content from those sources, various sources, in a really intuitive way. What we didn't want to get into was content sprawl, where we simply threw something on the page and people scroll, 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 and eventually they find it, right? We know that doesn't work. We want it to be really concise. We wanted people to look at it and say, in a second, okay, I understand what this is, what the content is I'm able to look at, and how I'm able to explore it. So creating a simple design framework was a key to all of this. So we had some significant challenges. To achieve all of this in an effective way required the right approach, which Pam's going to talk to you about.
That's right. So it's been just described. That's a pretty ambitious undertaking, right? So we knew we wanted to kick things off the right way. As I mentioned earlier, we are an Agile shop. We have been for some time. All of the solutions that we deliver on multiple platforms, we do through the Scrum framework. So we kind of knew that Agile was going to be our approach, but we really wanted to get back to basics. So we started with something we call a Sprint Zero. Some people call it a project kickoff. Essentially, if there's nothing else you take away today, a little nugget, sounds simple, a project kickoff, but done the right way, there's a huge amount of value in this. So again, it's kind of got us back to basics. What we did was we co-located as many people as we can. And just looking at the photo, I just want to mention that that's not a stock photo, right? That's us actually in Ireland, in their innovation lab, working on Sprint Zero, and every one of those Post-its was accounted for. And I think that was day 2. I think we had, multiple days ahead of us. So it still astonishes me that we could account for every single piece of information that we came up with during that process. So anyway, we co-located in Ireland. We brought people in from different locations. And that co-location is not critical, but it's important. It helps with that team building aspect of this event. But you have to bring in everybody who's going to participate in the building of this product, right? We knew the teams, the dev teams, the Scrum teams that we were working with. They had a lot of institutional knowledge. They had a lot of experience with Agile and Scrum. So we brought all the developers, the QA, the Scrum Masters, our product owner, management, a lot of the teams that were involved in the self-service automation engine that I mentioned earlier that we were building, right? A lot of expertise that was there that we wanted to leverage, right? Get a jump start on all of that. Brought them together. And what you do, in our case, we had an Agile coach that walks you through a series of exercises that's really designed to help you walk away, everyone that I just mentioned, walk away with a common understanding and a common expectation about what you're building, why you're building it, you hear it right from your product owner, and how you're going to approach it, right? We knew that SharePoint was our, probably the platform that we were going to use, but there's a lot of details that we had to get through, right? So everyone walks away with that common understanding. But the real, for me anyway, the real value in this is that as people walk away and go back to their home base and they start Sprint 1, they start that development process, they've walked away with that sense of responsibility, right, and ownership. They've had a say. They were at the table and they contributed. They provided a lot of input. They agreed with certain approaches or disagreed with them. They acknowledged that they were still learning the platform, right? So all of that goes in. But when they go back, they feel that sense of motivation to deliver on what they said they could do. They agreed to it, so now they have to deliver. And that carries throughout the project, not just at the beginning, but it also carries throughout the length of the project. We still see it today in many cases. But once again, we walked in the door to Sprint Zero with some preconceived notions, some old mindsets about what we wanted to do. We thought we knew what the design initially was going to look like. We had a lot of experience with intranets. It's this standalone thing that you try to push people to and keep their attention on. We had infused the team with a really good partner in Ireland that had a lot of experience with building these digital experiences for other customers. And it took some convincing and some talking to, but they made us realize that why do you want to break out of the Office 365 framework? Right out of the box with very little effort, almost zero effort, and no risk. You've got all this great goodness that comes with the platform, right? You've got applications at a click. You've got all kinds of notifications, access to mail, all of that at your fingertips right from day one with very little effort. So now you're starting to sense that we're approaching things. We have to deal with changing mindsets. And us as technologists, we're not the only ones that had to kind of shift that mindset, but we also had to deal with the stakeholders and where they were in the process and how we were going to get them on board with what we were doing. So Ben's going to talk a little bit about how that process started.
Yeah, thanks, Pam. And I just want to say, I know you're saying the right thing, saying it's not an absolute must that you co-locate at the start, but it's pretty important. So I want to talk a little bit about the processes that we adopted as we moved through this development. But I would say that in almost every sense, that initial project, that initial get-together in Ireland with all the stakeholders, that became the seed that grew into everything that we were able to accomplish over the course of the next year and a half. So first of all, since we were partnering so effectively, I'm speaking now from a business perspective, we were partnering so effectively with our technology group, we wanted to extend this sort of deep ownership-based partnership to our content author partners. So as I mentioned, we had to sell them on moving off of their old intranets, but we knew we couldn't simply say, here's the template, go and populate it with content, and we'll see you at launch. We knew that there was a change in thinking. There were a lot of paradigm shifts that had to be made. We had a lot of enthusiasm, but we didn't have the know-how on their part. So what we did was our group, Global Communications, and Pam's group, Global Technology, got together and built a team. We called it the Vision Care Team. Get it, right? We called it the Vision Care Team. It was made up of content strategists who partnered with each of the businesses and took them through a series of workshops all the way up to the point where their sites were built and the people were trained and they took ownership of the sites, right? We began by asking them to describe to us who they were communicating with and why, so that we got to a common understanding. We didn't go in there and simply try to tell them what to do. We looked at metrics, we looked at their content, we did analysis, we ran through a series of iterations on their content, constantly taking them down to a simpler and simpler presentation of that content. The content could actually go very deep. We started to use embedded files, and I will show you an example of that later, so that if employees wanted to, they could go in and really deep dive into a particular section. But it was the basic profile site, the intranet site, was presented in a very simple way. So we used this team to build those partnerships to take them along that journey. As we did this, we made just about everything we were doing from a homepage design perspective, we made that transparent to our partners. This doesn't mean that we opened up the door for feedback, right? We didn't want to get that too many cooks model going. But what we did want to do was have them understand it, so that since they were now basically partners in the homepage as well, they understood where we were heading and they felt like they had some line of sight into how we were progressing. As we went through the process, we continued to explore alternate designs. I think this started out maybe by accident. Maybe it was just a couple of dumb decisions I made on how the design should work. But as we worked through it, we started to say, you know what, we have an idea. It's not quite what we're focusing on right now, but we would still explore it. And we would sometimes create different scenarios for design. So we would say, well, if this, then what would this look like? How would this impact it? Now, I will get to, I think, the value of this approach later on, but it really was for us, I think, a constant exercise in group thinking, communal thinking, team thinking, and also allowed us to address different scenarios. The final process, I think, key approach that we had was around user testing. So when you're focusing on your employees, you have your customers right there all the time. I mean, they're always, you know, across the hall, down a few flights. You can go anywhere and you can get people to test. And we started to find that if we could get between 5 and 7 employees in front of anything that we wanted to test, we got some really good results, right? It allowed us to make some changes, do some pivots, and be, basically very responsive to the feedback we were getting as we went through the process. Now, all of these approaches, as I mentioned, paid off when some surprises arose. One significant one I'll mention was one of our key stakeholders, one of our key content partners, who had thought they were going to be off on a separate site and wouldn't be joining the framework at the time we were launching, suddenly had a change of plans. There was an opportunity to include them sooner, but by including them, this had an impact on our design. Our design did not account for them. Now, this could have been in a normal project, sort of that, block in the road, and suddenly everything stops and you have to go back to the drawing board. But we had, in fact, explored designs that had anticipated their inclusion in the process later on, perhaps a year down the road. What we were able to do was revisit one of those designs, tweak it, and then take it to each of our stakeholders very quickly. We did this in an afternoon. We took it to 12 different stakeholder groups, ran them through it. Because we had been transparent with them through the whole process, they understood the value of this change. They understood what this would be basically adding to the project from an employee standpoint, and every single one of them signed off on the approach. So we were able to do, in a matter of a few weeks, what I think normally would have taken months and months of work. So this was, as you can all recognize, this was the agile process in action, right? This was agile thinking. This was our being very lean and adaptive. We had grounded our approach in basic Agile principles from the beginning, and Pam's going to talk to you a bit about those.
Yeah, so I'm sure you're sensing by now, right, this theme of change, right? Change is inevitable. You know, not just the environment we're in, there's a huge degree of change that comes with us with being in the cloud and the Office 365 environment. But as Ben mentioned, you know, can come at you from different ways. So being Agile, I think, aligns really well to that concept, because one of the primary principles or pillars of Agile is to embrace change. You have to be able to react to change quickly. Either absorb or move on, or you know, you're just not going to be successful. And it still amazes me that our team, every time we come at them with change, and we do quite often, there's quite a bit of things that we always have to challenge them with. They just approach it head on with a calm and confidence that is just refreshing to me every time. I just give you guys all the credit, right? But I think one of the reasons that they can do that and they can take that approach is one of our other guiding principles is about that low code, no code, minimize customization principles that we established right up front, right? I don't want to give you the impression that we don't have customizations. We do. We have quite elaborate customizations in some ways. As a matter of fact, I found out a fun fact last night that we delivered 24 custom components in the same time it took Microsoft to deliver 33. Don't tell Microsoft, but you know, I think we're doing pretty well. So, you know, being Agile really is enabled us to be successful in this environment. You know, the other guiding principle that we established up front that I mentioned earlier is modern, right? We knew that we wanted to take this mobile-first approach to things. When we started out, Team Sites was what was available at the time, and we had the most knowledge about. A little bit further down in the process, Communication Sites came out. Right, and obviously, Team Sites had some modern aspects, but Communication Sites, you know, far outweighed all of the modern capabilities that Team Sites had to offer. So we wanted to shift, once again, changing midstream from that core foundation template from one to the other, and able to do that pretty quickly. What we didn't realize with that, though, when we did shift to Communication Sites, a little bit later on, further down in the backlog, once it was prioritized, was our search capabilities, which is another critical you know, must-have for us, is to improve on that search experience. With Communication Sites, you get modern search experience out of the box. And honestly, what we wanted to accomplish with search, based on, you know, our stakeholders' requirements, aligned much better with classic search. So, you know, we had to react quickly. We had to kind of come up with our own blended, semi-homemade approach to things, where we kind of redirect things to the classic search and put enough of a tweak on it so that it has enough modern right now for us to get by. And I say that for a reason, because one of the other principles with Agile is about iterative improvement, right? You can constantly improve on what you're delivering on. And with every sprint, you have potentially shippable code. We see that constantly with new capabilities, but one of the ways that it really resonated for us was with being able to promote enough functionality and capability to production well ahead of the final delivery of the product, enabled us to allow the partners and the authors and the content owners to get into the tool very early on. I think we got them in first quarter, late first quarter, early second quarter, right, to really start to build out their content well ahead of the final delivery of that product. We're constantly delivering more functionality. And I have to say, I was thinking about this last night. I can't remember any significant disruption that we had to the authors during the entire process. So, I mean, that's huge, right? And if we had to wait until we finally delivered the product to allow the authors in to build out that content, our timeline would have been significantly different. You know, and it also allowed us to test the tool, right? The authors are in there. They're actually using it. Is it doing what we thought it was going to do? Are they able to create the content the way we kind of wanted them to reimagine it, right? And is it performing the way we want? So lots of benefits to being Agile, you know, to assist us in evolving what we wanted to do on vision. So we've been doing a lot of talking, and I think now we want to show you the result. And Ben's going to take you on the tour.
So every demo should start with disclaimer. At least I work for Prudential, so I've come to believe that. We are currently still working on the production site. rather than show you something that is still got kind of an under construction feel to it, we're showing you some mock-ups, but these are very true to the design that we're delivering. This is our employee homepage. What you're seeing is most of the homepage. There's a little bit more that you can scroll down and see, but we're presenting a lot of content in a very concise way. The model here you can see right at first screen is my company, which is news from Prudential, my business, which in this case is news from the Global Business Technology Solutions Group, that's Pam's group, and then myself. So this is content that comes from our HR team. This is content that has to do with your career, with health and wellness, with learning. It's all the things that help you manage your career as an employee. Now, this is content coming from 3 completely separate sources. Obviously, somebody coming in from our asset management group is going to see that middle strip is going to be their content. It's going to be specific to the employee. But what we've done is, again, in order to present a lot of content in minimal space, we've created an approach that we've likened to Netflix and Amazon Prime, where you can go in and you can see things organized in rows as you move down the page vertically, but you interact with them horizontally, right? So by scrolling through each section, you're able to see 1 or 2 weeks worth of news right at first screen. If you move to the right of that container, there's a view all that takes you to a dedicated feed page so that you can see all the content from that source. So again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to present the employee with the content that's most relevant to them right at first view, but then give them the option to explore if they should so choose. Below this view, you would see my subscriptions, and that is exactly what it sounds like in this new model that we've built. We have content authors from all over the enterprise. We have them in our technology areas, in our business areas, in our corporate centers. Employees can go to any one of those areas and hit a subscribe button on their content page, and then all that news will now be delivered to them on their home page. The last section, we just broke it out so that we don't clutter the different sections, is time-based publications. So events, announcements, there's going to be a town hall, flu shots start next week. So again, the same model applies with every one of these. We present the most current ones at first view. They can scroll through them, and then they can go and they can see a lot more content in a full feed view if they should so choose. At the top of the page, it's small here, but it's a very powerful piece of real estate for us in this new framework. We're using the Microsoft Application Customizer, which basically is a container that we can place on the page, and we can control the code that resides within that container, right? So it gives us a lot of flexibility. We are currently using it for something we're calling My Quick Links. So this contains some default links that we're pushing out to everybody, so My Time, My Pay, things like that. To the far left is a dedicated link to their business's intranet site. But employees can go in, and to the right there's a button that allows you to manage. They can go in and they can add as many links to this application customizer as they choose, effectively creating their own portable dashboard. This is persistent across all pages within Vision, and it allows them to have that ready, convenient jump-off point to any of the sites that they want to go to the work that they need to do. Some of the other things that we have in here is the stock price, which, as you know, every time we do an employee survey, comes back as the single most important piece of content. I'm actually glad to hear that because I know everybody's working with that in mind. But we also have one piece of transactional capability built into here. It's called My Actions, and this is a service that links up with multiple databases and brings employees notices about things that are time sensitive that require them to complete an action. So they may approve a time off, they may have to take some required training, things like that. This is very important for us because this is the first step on the road to what we think the application customizer will become in the future, which is essentially more of a mini dashboard, which will bring in some of the self-service tools that we're going to be introducing later next year from our HR team. So we have an HCM solution that we're planning on launching, and this will create some really robust sort of self-help, self-management career tools that employees can see. What we'd like to do is we'd like to access the underlying data and services there to bring really relevant information into that top bar, so that instead of having to go to My Time to see if you have enough time to schedule a vacation, you can go in there and you can just see, I have 138 hours of PTO left, and you can call your spouse and you can say, we can book that vacation. So we're looking to make this more and more valuable to the employees over time as the site becomes much more integrated between content, tools, and these sort of self-management capabilities. If you could go to the next slide.
So can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
The customization on that, is that, so that homepage is, everyone gets their own custom homepage, or is it by department, or like, at what level does that?
Did you pay him to say?
Yes, so everyone,
What, is this a segue to the next section?
everyone does get the same homepage. So
Okay.
the middle web part that you're seeing there, we're calling this News from GBTS. What we do is all of the content is published based on search queries within the web parts. So it runs a query, and we have 3 different profile attributes that we look for. And so if Pam comes on, it says, okay, Pam is a part of GBTS, and we have GBTS content. We're going to display that web part there, and we're going to populate it with GBTS content. Now, in some cases, we have organizations who are more complex in their structure. So we have sort of a division presence where we'll have our individual solutions group, and that is the group that is sort of the umbrella organization over all of our businesses that touch individual customers. So that would be our life insurance, our annuities. When an employee comes from any of those groups, that query is going to look for the fact that they are a part of that individual solutions group, but it's also going to say, I see that they're part of our individual life insurance group. So if the content is being published from there, they're going to serve that up as well. So it's actually a pretty simple query, which is determining the content that gets placed there and whether or not the component shows up. But it ends up being very powerful in terms of getting that relevant content to the employees. So in that sense, it's different. Within the application customizer, we're also building in personalization rules that will display the different links.
So if I was part of GBTS, I'd see this. Would I be able to also see news from another department?
So there you have that opportunity, and we're about to go to the profile page, but if you subscribe to the profile page, and as I say, these are just screenshots, but just below the view here is a web part called My Subscriptions, and that pulls in all the content that you've chosen to subscribe to from all of the different authoring sources. So yes, you can go to any one of those. Now, again, we understand that not all content is for everyone. So one of the things we have baked into our solution is the ability to target content. So it wouldn't necessarily go to the homepage except for a targeted group of people, but it's not necessarily secured. But they also have the opportunity to security trim that content, so that if they have a fairly substantial group of employees who need to see something, but there are whether they're managers or whether they're part of a regulated group where you have to have firewalls around the content, whatever the reasoning is, they can publish content that would be pushed out to those employees. But because it's security trimmed, even if someone were to share it, reference it to somebody who doesn't have access to it, they wouldn't be able to access it.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Next slide.
Our profile page, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what I was talking about when I said that we had created this template for the intranet sites. The first page you're going to land on is going to be the content that the group is publishing. And it's right under news and information over there. There's a little button, but that's a really powerful button. That's the subscribe button. So obviously Pam would not see this if she came to this page because she is a GBTS employee, so she is subscribed by default. But I would go to this page, I would look at their content, I'd say, dang, there's some great stuff here. I want this on my homepage. I hit that button, I now have it. And I can go in and manage that. There's a manage page where we have all the subscription sources available to employees in one view, and they can go in and add and remove them as they choose. We even have some content topics that they can subscribe to that any group can publish into. So those are topics that tend to go across all of our groups, all of our functions, things like technology and innovation that anybody could publish into. The About Us page As I mentioned, this is the page where the business or the corporate center is pushing out content that talks about who they are and what they do. This is the enterprise-facing content for their organization. Now, you can see at the top under About Us, we have some anchor links. This is a custom web part that we built, but this is one of the ways that we were able to wean people off of the create a new page, create a new page, create a new page with the long top menus and the flyouts, and you're trying to find something and your cursor goes off and you have to start over. So within a single page, we can actually embed a significant amount of content. One of the things I want to call out, I just threw some lorem ipsum in there so nobody can yell at me. I actually took one of the PowerPoints that one of our businesses created, right? So you can see that PowerPoint is being surfaced through the page, and on there you see different functional areas, right? So you see operations and systems and finance and human resources. Now, this is a PowerPoint. When you click on any one of those, it navigates and it loads instantly, right? It flies through, you're able to see all of that content, all of the related links. This actually replaced 16 web pages that they had in their old intranet, right? So this idea of simplifying everything, flattening everything, making everything consistent did not take away from the fact that we're able to still present a really robust content experience to the employees. One thing I want to mention about this, and then I'm going to turn it over to Pam because we're getting very close to time, is that by using files to present content, we actually take the document repository within the site and turn that into a content management system. So now, instead of groups having to work through a web team to update web pages, what we do is we give ownership of these files, of these documents, to the appropriate subject matter experts within their organization. They then become responsible for updating them, and then the latest and greatest is always on the home page. So it's a really efficient way to manage content that displays on the profile sites. As I mentioned, this is a first step. It's a big first step for us. There's a lot of work still to go. Pam's going to talk a little bit about that and then wrap this up.
Yeah, just to wrap things up a little bit. So I don't know if you remember when we started out the session, right? There was a journey in front of us. There was a road ahead of us. It was a little bit cloudy out in the distance, maybe a rainbow out there. There's always going to be a road ahead of us. It's going to have twists and turns. But honestly, not to get too sappy, I think it's a little bit brighter now. And the reason that that's so bright is between our agile operating model and the way that we approach dev, we feel like we're really well positioned for the future, whether it be incorporating change or taking advantage of all the good stuff that Microsoft is introducing. And we're positioned really well, like I said, for long-term success, going after that employee digital experience that we're all after, right? And really evolving that over time. So just a real quick look ahead on some of the things that are on our roadmap. This is just a taste, and Ben described the application customizer. A lot of aspirations there on what to do with that. Bring in a lot of that HR, data that everyone's interested in and want at their fingertips, right? So they're going to evolve the functionality that's there. But we also want to connect the dots back to the self-service products that I talked about in the beginning, right? Yes, this application customizer is with you during your travels on the Vision framework, but why not extend that to the entire platform? So now you're connected no matter where you go. So, lots going on in that space. Metrics in mobile, again, other areas where we're really evolving. Metrics, we actually have our architect here who did a lot of the assessment on this. We're building a framework there where we can produce those metrics and analytics and reports that everybody is so hungry for, right, to improve things, with what you're doing. We'll be able to take that framework that we're building on the Vision framework and move it out and extend it to the broader platform, to the broader audience, so everyone will be able to take advantage of that. In mobile, mobile's a struggle for us at Prudential. Right now we're in this, it's a challenge. We're in this MDM environment, right, device managed environment, and we want to move towards that Microsoft offering, right, the Intune and MAM approach to things, and all that goes with that. So we actually had some really good late breaking news before we left to come here, and we're looking forward to significant improvements. We're staying on top of all that's going on in that space, and we don't think it'll be a day one deliverable, but it's soon, definitely a fast follow. And that's, for the most part, a wrap-up of the presentation, I do want to give a quick shout-out to a related session. Like I said, we do have 2 of our tech leads here from Ireland, and they will be doing a session on Thursday, and they're going to dive a lot deeper into the technical aspects of what we're doing with Vision in terms of agile engineering practices, test-driven development, and all that goes with that. So very good session. Highly recommend that. We're about out of time, but Ben and I will be here for a little while. If anybody has any questions, wants to stop by, just pull us aside and we'll have a quick chat. But I thank you for your attendance and
Thank you.
have a great conference. Don't forget the evaluations.